Hello everyone, and welcome to the annual general meeting of Eastern North Hertfordshire NHS Trust. I'm Ellen Schroeder and I'm chair of the Trust. I'm delighted that some of you have been able to join us online, and the recording of this meeting will be available online later. Our AGM gives us the opportunity to tell you about developments and the performance of the Trust over the previous year, and to provide a look ahead to our future priorities. But first, I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Justin Daniels to his first AGM as our new medical director.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Justin.
Thank you.
So this is a slightly bittersweet occasion for me, as it will be my last AGM as chair of the Trust. I'll be leaving soon to join Great Ormond Street Hospital as their chair. While I'm very excited about my next move, I'm also very sad to be leaving the Trust. It's been a real honour and privilege to be here as chair for nearly 8 years and to have seen how the Trust has grown and changed over those years. I've learnt so much from being here, and there are 3 things that will remain with me about my time here. Firstly, the focus across the Trust in not only caring for its patients, but always seeking to improve how we do that, whether it's through some small changes or by building a new hybrid theatre. The real joy of celebrating our staff doing amazing things, and that's from being at our staff awards sessions or to just reading patient feedback. And thirdly, it's true that people say it's like a family here, and that's never been more true than during the pandemic, when I saw incredible bravery, courage and teamwork. So thank you for letting me be part of your family. Next slide. Now to the agenda. I'm going to talk for a short while about the Trust, our charity, and how we're working with the community and our NHS and council partners, both in our local area and more widely across Hertfordshire and West Essex. Then Martin Armstrong, our Director of Finance and Deputy Chief Executive, will present our annual accounts. Our Chief Nurse, Teresa Murphy, and Dr. Justin Daniels will present key points from our quality accounts, which look at the quality of care that we provide. Then we'll hear the story of Sarah, who's sharing her experience as a carer of working for improvement in the Trust. Then we'll hear from our Chief Executive, Adam Sewell-Jones, who will talk about our future direction and priorities. You'll then have the chance to ask questions, which you can do by clicking on the Q&A tab and vote for your favourite questions. Please do send your questions as you think of them. Don't wait until the end. Next slide. As always, I want to start this evening by thanking everyone who works in our Trust, in each of our sites and in all of our services. We continue to work really hard for all our patients, not only those who need urgent and emergency care, but those who remain waiting for operations or procedures. We know how even a short delay can affect a patient's life, and we're all doing all we can to see you as soon as possible. I'm really pleased to tell you that we have virtually erased our list of people waiting over 2 years for treatment. We only have 1 person remaining on that list. Our next aim is to reduce the number of people waiting over 78 weeks. We currently have 573 people remaining on this list. Adam will talk later about how we're investing to ensure that this progress continues. So turning to some of the achievements from last year. Next slide. I always like this slide because it reminds me of just how many lives we touch each year. It's quite something. If you include our patients at Mount Vernon, we saw just over 285,000 patients last year, but we carried out or performed over 900,000 procedures, appointments and A&E attendances for those patients. And that's in the context of us serving a population of about 600,000 people. And while I've just been talking about waiting lists, I wanted to highlight the increase in our operations and procedures, over 84,000 last year compared to 78,000 the year before. So that's an extra 500 patients a month having operations or procedures. Next slide. And that's just the operational figures. With regards to our staff, we've seen some great progress in our staff survey response rate and in the workforce race equality standard. There's more to do to ensure equity for all our staff, but we have seen significant improvements over the last year. Next slide. One of the things that's really helped us increase our number of procedures is our new procedures rooms for simpler operations, helping patients get in and out in a day. We're seeing more people in our community diagnostic centre down at the new QE2, over 16,000 more people last year. We've refurbished our emergency department, our mortuary, and some of the wards in our tower block. And Mount Vernon Cancer Centre has seen an investment of £7 million to carry out improvements to their buildings. We've also made a number of improvements in our maternity service, both to our estates and to our processes, and we look forward to receiving the CQC report within the next few weeks. Next slide, please. Working closely with our NHS and local authority partners is more than ever crucial to how we deliver care. Next slide. And our Hospital at Home service, run by Hertfordshire Community Trust, continues to receive fantastic feedback from patients about the high quality of care they receive in their home. Adam will talk later about the new service, which is helping to care for patients with heart failure at home. Slide. We owe a lot to our hospital's charity and to our communities who so generously support the charity. In the last financial year, the charity raised an incredible £1.1 million, which has allowed us to provide extra touches for our patients and staff. Next slide, please. Just 3 examples include a Life Start resuscitator trolley for our maternity service, a video laryngoscope, for our children's services. It's also enabled us to get some equipment to get children to be treated at the Lister instead of having to travel back and forth to London. And of course, our Sunshine Appeal, raising funds to create an outdoor space for our critical care patients to see the sun and the sky, and which raised over £100,000 in 48 hours in July last year. Our charity has also generously funded many initiatives for our staff, including our annual Thank You Week and our Staff Awards event, so we're very grateful to them. And finally, thank you to our volunteers who continue to support us. It's been great to welcome them back properly into the Trust after COVID, as they've made such a difference to our patients. And that includes our musicians and our therapy animals, including our therapy ponies, as pictured here. So once again, to all our staff, volunteers and partners, thank you. Now I'm going to hand over to Martin to present the account.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen.
Ponies to accounts.
Yeah, often as I want to do the trust, people stop me and say, you know, that AGM, Martin, that's really is the most thrilling, exciting part of it when you talk about the money. So I think I'll just get straight into it and people waiting. We've talked previously in this kind of session about how kind of financial arrangements in the NHS have changed during the course of COVID, and that has happened yet again during 22-23. And it's just worth kind of sharing some of the fundamentals of how we've received our funding during the year. The vast majority of it continues to come through as a block of fixed payment, and that's a share of an overall allocation to our system. We have continued to receive some funding in respect of addressing some of the very specific lingering impacts of kind of COVID. You can see that £11.7 million kind of last year. Maybe we'll return to that amount kind of a little bit further on in the presentation. And we've also been able to earn some additional elective recovery funding during the course of this year as we worked hard to restore planned services in the Trust. The next slide, many will recognise from kind of previous kind of AGMs, it tells the story of our financial performance over the last decade or so. And, you know, we've recognised that maybe some of the difficulties that we had in terms of financial performance 7 or 8 years ago on there. But over the last 2 or 3 years, I've been able to come and talk about the work that the Trust has done to really return to financial balance. And that's been good and that's been important for the organisation. But you'll see on that far right-hand side block on there, you know, 22-23 has been a very challenging year for us financially. We did report a £6.1 million deficit, and we'll come on to talk a little bit about why that is and what we're doing to address it. I think it is really positive, looking at the next slide, to be able to reflect that we have been able to continue to make capital investments within the organisation. And Ellen, in her presentation, showed you some pictures of some of those things: procedure rooms, new mental health rooms, etc. But almost £18 million spent across those kind of 4 different kind of headings on there. Of course, some of that is about keeping the basic lights on in the service, but I say some important strategic developments for us as a Trust as well. So let's just reflect in a little bit more detail about our financial performance kind of this year. There are 5 kind of key statutory targets that we have to endeavour to meet as a trust. One about kind of breaking even across our income and expenditure within each year, but also managing within identified cash and capital limits and making what's called a capital cost absorption rate, a rate of return. And also quite importantly as well, better payment practice code, how we pay our suppliers within 30 days. And that's a really important thing in very difficult economic times. And you can see that we've delivered most of those kind of core responsibilities, but obviously we haven't quite got there in terms of our I&E performance. And there, I just wanted to reflect a little bit on the next slide in terms of actually why was that? Say we reported a £6.1 million kind of deficit. It is important to note that actually other organisations within our system were able to underspend to an equal, not an opposite kind of measure, and that has allowed Herts and West Essex as our ICS system to report an overall balanced position, and that's really important in terms of kind of NHS and kind of system kind of governance. We talked at the very beginning of the presentation about some of the very specific COVID funding we've received during the course of the pandemic. And yes, we did receive some kind of last year, but it was a greatly reduced amount compared with kind of previous years, a fall of almost £16.5 million. To balance that out, we needed, therefore, last year to set some pretty ambitious and challenging savings targets for the year ahead. Again, almost £19 million. Although we delivered almost 2/3 of that, and that should be reflected on with kind of credit, we didn't achieve everything that we needed to, and we slipped against those savings targets by almost £7 million. Now we recognise as a trust that has identified an area of weakness in our financial governance and delivery, and we have spent a lot of time as a trust reflecting on how we can do that better kind of in future years. So we talked a little bit about the kind of financial performance for last year. Of course, that's my view of it as the Director of Finance for the Trust, but you don't have to just accept my view of it. The Trust has independently appointed auditors, a firm called BDO, who come into the organisation. They take our draft accounts and spend a lot of time, and they did spend a lot of time kind of this year, from the end of April through to the beginning of kind of June, reviewing, checking, validating, auditing kind of those accounts. And their professional opinion at the end of that is that actually our financial statements are a true and fair view of the organisation's financial performance. The remuneration report has also been audited and properly prepared. And I think it's also important to note they also do a little bit of a review in terms of value for money, and they check the arrangements that we have in place to ensure that we're properly using public funds, economy, efficiency and effectiveness. And I think it's probably unsurprising that, yes, they did find very positive things in respect of that report, but they did reflect, as we have reflected, in terms of our saving kind of delivery and the need to do better in future years. So finally, there's that little bit in terms of, yes, we're looking at last year's performance, but we're almost now kind of half the way into the new financial year. And of course, it probably feels like I say this every year, and actually I do say this every year, but the current year is an equally challenging, perhaps an even more challenging year for us financially as a trust, and also for us as a system. Again, COVID funding levels have reduced further kind of this year to relatively negligible kind of amounts. Some of the savings that we didn't make last year, we have to make and catch up on kind of this year. So that means that we do, like actually an awful lot of the NHS kind of this year, have a really sizable and significant CIP kind of programme. I think I am pleased to report that a part of the way into the year, actually performance does look fundamentally better against that. And I'd like to hope that as a trust, I expect that we have learned some of the lessons from that and put robust processes sort of in place. The trust needs to deliver to balance its books, but of course that is also true of the system and the organisations that we work with alongside Herts and West Essex, and that again looks challenging kind of this year. And set within all of that context is just industrial action, of course, does have financial impacts for the service, and that will impact our position as well. So hopefully that's been a useful walkthrough in terms of kind of last year's performance, but also signalling some of the challenges and opportunities that we have for the year ahead.
Thank you, Martin.
Thanks,
Thank you. Very clear. OK, I'm going to hand over now to Teresa and Justin.
Thank you so much. over the past 12 months, we've had a consistent focus on delivering high quality, safe and effective care. And some of the examples you'll see on our slide here, we're very proud of. Firstly, we have fully embedded our electronic prescribing for our patients. And what that means is that our patients do get their prescriptions and their medications in a more timely fashion, actually a safer fashion as well. So we're very proud of that achievement. Also, over the past 12 months, we've really strengthened our antimicrobial prescribing, and that's helped us reduce infections and control our C. diff infections across our hospital. And I'm particularly proud, as is Justin, our medical director, of the contribution our pharmacists have made to this, which has been absolutely phenomenal. We've seen good performance in the timeliness of responding to deteriorating patients. These are patients that are very sick and very vulnerable and perhaps outside of critical care. But we know that in terms of cardiac arrest, we benchmark very well across the country with 0.09% per 100 bed days as a proportion of the cardiac arrest that we have across our organisations. In January this year, we transitioned our VTE risk assessments for all patients onto Nerve Centre, and we have seen a really solid improvement in our assessments, and that is keeping patients safe from blood clots. We're very proud of that. Next slide, please. As we continue to build our quality improvement capability and capacity, again, we're proud and pleased to see that in July this year, we managed to become the second trust in the country to receive the Pathways to Excellence designation. This is an international best-in-class standard awarded by the Magnet organisations across the US. So we sit in a very small group that has managed to achieve this, and we're very proud of the significance this means to our staff and our patients. We've supported over 200 staff to get them through modules and training around bite-sized training for quality improvements. And the impact of that is changing patients' experience and staff experience for the better. 33 of those staff have completed quality improvement projects across the trust, and those have included equality, diversity and person-centred care. So I think this is going to be a really exciting next 12 months when we sit here next year and we talk about the achievements those staff have made. Next slide, please. A very good example of quality improvement for us, as you would expect, is accessibility for emergency care for all of our patients. So what you'll see on this slide is that we really have focused very, very much on carers. So our carers we identified as a group that were perhaps not as well represented, both in our organisation, also with our patient groups. So solid work across our patient experience domains, also trying to capture many, many of our staff who are also designated carers, and trying to lean in and listen and learn as to how we improve the carers' experience. And finally, everyone will be pleased to know that there has been extensive work undertaken around our emergency access pathways. We have completed the ambulance handover area, which has been very successful. We've seen a renewed improvement in terms of our ambulance delays. We've also seen a great sort of energy and a call to arms, both from patients, staff and our ambulance services around creating a seamless pathway. We know we have more to do, but I think the ambulance handover area, our new systems and processes puts us in a very good position for the rest of the year and indeed into next year. And finally, complaints, concerns and compliments. Well, complaints are the jewels that we receive in the NHS, and it's what we do with them. So I'm really pleased to say that we are changing how we manage our long-term complaints. So patients who've waited far too long to get a response from us are now seeing early calls being made to them. We've seen a net reduction in the outstanding number of complaints we've got, and we're working very hard to ensure that our next focus, the rest of this year, will be on our patient advice and liaison service, energising and activating our matrons and ward managers to be with patients and carers and staff to pick up complaints before they happen. Good progress on our friends and family tests across the board. We are an organisation that gets great feedback, and it's how we use that negative feedback to drive improvements. Thank you. I'll now hand over to Dr. Justin Daniels.
Thank you so much. And can I also say a big thank you to everybody who's made me feel so welcome in the organisation so far. I've only been here 4 months, but it's already beginning to feel an awful lot like home. So my role, along with Teresa, is to think about the quality of the care that we provide to patients in the hospital. And the slide you can see is about mortality, it's about death rates. And what it shows is that as a hospital, we compare really favourably with other hospitals, where the blue line on the two graphs you can see that's close to the left-hand side. And what that's telling us from two different rankings is that we have a low rate of deaths for patients admitted to our hospital. That's not enough, though, because if we only had a low rate of deaths, then we would be asking questions about, do we keep patients in hospital too long? Do we have higher readmission rates? And I'm really pleased to say that actually our length of stay is good, both for our patients admitted for elective procedures and our patients who come in for emergency procedures, but also our readmission rate is really low. So that shows that we're admitting the right patients for the right amount of time and hopefully doing the right thing for them. Go to the next slide, please. So how do we create a safe environment? This is desperately important in the NHS at the moment. And I think the most important thing we can do is have a culture of openness. We want a senior leadership team that listens to our clinicians, and it's something that I try, along with the rest of the exec team, to do very hard. We have an effective medical examiner service. I met with the medical examiner team this week. Many of you may have heard about this service. It's something that is relatively new within the NHS, and it's a service that reviews the death of every patient within NHS hospitals, but also is starting to review the deaths of all patients within the community. And we have really robust mortality surveillance. I've shown you a couple of the graphs that we look at, but there are a number of other indices that we look at on a week-by-week and month-by-month basis. Like all other NHS hospitals, we're introducing something called PSERF, the Patient Safety Incident Response Framework. And that's something that allows us to look in a different way when things go wrong, and to understand them better and to change how we work. We're also looking at it at the same time as thinking about this restorative and just culture. And that's also a very important part of this. If people feel that they're being singled out or they're punished when things go wrong, then we don't get a culture of openness and we don't get the change that we need. Next slide, please. So we're going to continue to look really hard at our mortality rates. We're also going to continue to look at lots of other data that comes through. And we'll use that to identify themes and trends. As I've said, the medical examiner role is really important in that. PSERF forms another part of it. We use something called structured judgment reviews when patients have died, in order to look and see how we can learn the most from those deaths. We also work very closely with the Child Death Overview Panel, and we work with an organisation called CHKS, who supply us with data. Next slide, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Justin and Teresa. So we're now going to hear a patient story, and this is going to be a video, and this is the story of Sarah and Nate.
I'm Sarah Lee, and I am a filmmaker, but I'm also an advocate for people with disabilities. So my son is called Nate, and he is 8 years old. He is autistic, he has some complex health needs and learning disability. My experiences coming into hospital with my son haven't always been good, and that's my reason for wanting to work on healthcare passports alongside Eleanor. I had joined a patient and carer experience meeting, and someone had mentioned it to me there and then introduced me to Eleanor, and we started working on it collaboratively.
So I support children and young people and their families who have medical complexity. So that's children that are living with uncertain health, who are often under a large number of medical teams, who have frequent hospital appointments and admissions, and quite vulnerable health. So the passports were in place before I took up my current role. So some of the senior nurses in the children's emergency department used them for children that they recognised had quite complex health and came into the department frequently. So it was a document that they used for those children. But when I came into post, listening to families who were telling me that the communication of what was really key for their child could be improved, I thought, let's look at the document again. Does it contain all the key information? Find out from my colleagues what they really wanted in it. and from families, and make improvements to the document, and then make it more widely available to children and families out in the community.
What the passport will do is all the information that's needed from medical professionals will be in that document. It will mean that we won't have to answer the same questions over and over again. People speaking in front of one another and too many conversations is quite unsettling for my son because he's very noise sensitive. So to reduce that is very helpful anyway. But to have everything in one place, and also the big thing for me is reasonable adjustments to be met if there are any access requirements, which, as I said, for my son is to have a quiet environment. My son really struggles to wait for any period of time, even 5-10 minutes late for an appointment makes it very difficult for him, and then we'll determine how the rest of the visit will go. We've had failed sedations because of this. We've come in despite having conversations over the phone saying he needed to be sedated as quickly as possible. It was still over 2 hours before he was. So then it failed because he spat it out and was half sedated, and then had to come back another time for a general anaesthetic. And it's things like I could foresee this stuff happening, but just wasn't listened to. So that is the point of the passports, to hopefully be listened to and having everything in one document that's accessible to everyone involved in his care.
The idea is that it's a family held record and as user friendly and clear as possible. So we've added things on the front page to signpost staff if an interpreter is needed, for example, if a child needs reasonable adjustments, if it's a child with an advanced care plan. And then we've got key information in red. So we have information about that child and who they are, what their normal vital signs are, so the clinical team know what their normal are, and if they're unwell, they can recognise the difference. And then we have a page about medication and medical history. So many families tell me that going through the medical history is quite emotionally challenging. So actually to be able to say to a clinical team, it's all written down, do you mind reading that, and then asking me any more questions that doesn't answer, can be really helpful.
Another hope for me is that the passports go into the wider trust and into GP surgeries as well, because that's another place where we do come across some barriers. So to have the posters up in GP surgeries all across the town would be fantastic. One thing we have managed to get secured, we've got funding allocated for, is a changing places toilet. So at the moment, the disabled toilets aren't fully accessible. So if I come into an outpatient's appointment with my son and he needs to be changed, I have to put him down on the floor in a toilet. We always bring a blanket with us to do this, but it's, in 2023, I shouldn't be putting my child on a dirty toilet floor. I'm not saying it's always dirty, but a toilet floor, which could be, to change him. So with this changing places toilet, there'll be an adult sized bed, there'll be a hoist for people who need it. One of the things that we have a lot is we get sent to the emergency department by the GP very often because they're unable to examine him, and their thinking is that he's gonna be seen as a priority when he comes in, and he's gonna have more people who are able to examine him, and that's just not the case. So we do push against being sent in when it's it can be dealt with there. So yeah, my hope for the passports is it goes out to the wider trust, including GPs. And it's so important to me that anyone who's patient facing is aware of this passport, receptionists, because we quite often meet that barrier as soon as we go in. They don't know what it is, and they don't understand what reasonable adjustments are.
We have information about how to communicate with a child or young person, how you'd know if they were in pain, how they mobilise, things about their personal care.
I can mention one visit that went really well and was the ideal kind of scenario in using the passport, I would say. My son had to come in for an MRI scan and he had to have a general anaesthetic. So I gave the passport over. I still get a little worried doing it because I don't know how people are going to be, and once they're dismissive, it's quite unsettling. But I handed the healthcare passport over to the radiology department, and they were just so enthusiastic about it. They said, "This is fantastic, I'm going to share it with my whole team." So they then went and shared it with their team. The anaesthetist came out to us and he was looking through it and he was asking questions that has come up in the passport, and said, this is how I'm going, I don't normally do it like this, but this is what I'm going to do because I can see he needs this tailored care from the passport. And he did it, and it went so smoothly. And it's an awful situation to have your child go under a general anaesthetic, but that transition, that understanding and the acknowledgement of the passport just really made all the difference.
So I think Sarah and I have always dreamed big, but taken small practical steps to try and get there. So we've had to help to develop a QR code so that families can download the passport onto an electronic device. We've now got posters so that we can put up to advertise and raise awareness for families and staff. And we're also talking about how we can make it a digital platform so that it's easier to update. And we've got evidence from other trusts across the country about how that might look and how that might work. So
to get the passport integrated, we're hoping to have mandatory training for staff so that everyone is aware of what the passport is and what it's used for, and we recognise it when it's presented to them by a parent. So to have it just widely available, going out into specialist schools as well, will just hopefully make all the difference. Just make staff aware to think access requirements first, think reasonable adjustments, think, what can we do within this document that's going to help to tailor the care to this child. I would love there to be a learning disability liaison nurse for children coming in, because to have that person in the hospital who understands the medical side of things, but also understands my child, would just be, I think, life-changing is a big thing to say, but it would make such a huge difference to us.
I think it's been a really joyful experience for me working with Sarah, getting her perspectives. I think at times when you're trying to make changes, you can come across barriers for different reasons, and actually it's been really helpful to motivate each other. And I think the support of colleagues across the trust has really helped as well with that.
My advice to other parents would be to download the passport, get a copy of the passport. It is still in the early stages around staff awareness, so please don't be put off if it's not accepted on your first use. Just keep trying, because we are pushing for that awareness.
Thanks very much. What an inspiring story, and it just shows that how a small change can make such a big difference. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Adam now.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you to Sarah and to Nate for contributing to that story, which I think really illustrates what we're trying to do in the organisation. So I've been at the Trust for about 20 months now, and it's flown by, so I'm approaching 2 years. And one of the things that I first did when I arrived in the organisation was to start a conversation about what's the vision for East and North Herts and where do we want to be by 2030. And so we pulled together a range of information we had, spoke to people, really tried to understand the culture. And we came up with this vision, which hopefully will appear on your screen: to be trusted to provide consistently outstanding care and exemplary service. And there are 3 bits in that we talk about a lot, because it's fine to have a vision and have it up on the wall, but really to make it resonate with our staff and for each of us every day as we come into work. The first is about being trusted. We really feel very strongly here we're part of the local community. The vast majority of our staff live locally, and this is the organisation where they would look to for their healthcare. And it's really important when they or a family or friend needs to come to the hospital, they feel a real sense of trust in their colleagues. And as that trust builds in our community, we know that we're delivering high quality care that people can be confident in. The second point is about consistency. And I see and sign off responses to every complaint that comes through in the organisation. And I also have the privilege where my office is, I look out over the entrance to maternity, and I see on a daily basis parents coming out with their new bundle of joy, with that kind of mix of fear and joy on their faces as they come out. But sometimes in speaking to those parents and going visiting them, even in those kind of first hours, just hearing the fantastic example of care that's being received. And I get that coming through in plaudit letters that we regularly receive. but we also get complaints and we don't get it right for everybody. So a real drive to make sure the consistency, we set our standards high and we deliver for everybody. And the last point is around exemplary service, because what we do is so much more than actually the clinical care. And we also have an awful lot of staff who make this organisation work that don't deliver hands-on patient care. And it's really important that they feel they're part of something special. So whether it's how we answer the phone, whether it's the correspondence we send out, whether it's finding somebody in the corridor that looks a bit lost and trying to point them to the right place, all of these things contribute to the service we provide. So that's where we want to get to, but we then had to work through what are the areas of focus we're going to put. And we came up with 4 strategic priorities. So the first one is about quality, and it's about this consistent high quality, but it's also a focus on making sure that we recognise there is a huge amount of health inequality around us. For lots of different reasons, people get different outcomes based on their care, how easily they can access services. And we even heard in that video some of those examples where people with particular challenges are not necessarily experiencing the best care unless we put a real focus in. The second area is around thriving people, as we describe it. So we want to recruit and retain high quality staff. You saw on one of the earlier slides, we've increased staff by 200 in the last year, and it remains an attractive place to come and work. But importantly, we wanted to respond to our staff feeling they wanted more control over the services they deliver, more autonomy to make decisions, and also take that accountability for running services. The third area is around seamless service. We recognise we're working as part of a healthcare system, and whilst we have to focus on what delivering as a trust, as patients we experience the NHS as one entity, and so we really need to, as we're planning services, make sure that the pathways that people follow, whether it's just within this organisation or across other organisations too, it's as seamless as possible so that people get a great experience. And finally, we need to embrace improvement. Whether it's delivering financial savings that have already been mentioned, whether it's hearing the quality improvements that have been described, tomorrow can be better than today, and we have to have that continual focus. And there are some real opportunities around digital that we need to embrace as part of that, but we also need to make sure all of our staff are equipped to make those changes. And then each year over this period, when we look forward, we've set ourselves some priorities. And here you see the 8 priorities that we've set for 23-24. And I'm not going to talk them through in detail, but there's really building on this Pathways to Excellence accreditation we've got, and our awards particularly focusing on the fundamentals of excellent care. We want to make sure that we meet all our regulatory requirements. We've recently been inspected by the CQC and we're awaiting the report, but they will no doubt have some actions and areas that they're suggesting we improve. So we want to make sure regulatorily we meet all our requirements. We're looking to make sure we can shift to more permanent staff away from temporary staffing, because we know whilst our temporary staff provide a really valuable resource for us, if we can get people signed up working here for many years, we know that experience really counts. And we want to make sure our staff feel supported while they're here, and grow together conversations are a hugely important part of that. How we appraise people's performance, we talk about their needs, and we understand what we can do to make working here as good as possible. We've already touched briefly on the emergency care pathway, and we've seen the numbers of people that come through there. So we need to work with our partners to make sure that despite the huge pressures we're seeing across the whole NHS, that we're seeing people in a timely fashion with high quality care. And again, we want to work with our partners to make sure as much of care as possible is delivered closer to home. There are some of our population that have huge needs on the health and care system, and we don't always serve them perfectly and pass them around the system. The closer to home we can deliver that care, the better it is for everybody. And then finally, we're implementing a new quality management system, and I'll talk about that in a bit more detail soon. But we also want to make sure that, particularly with the backlogs that we have in place and the waiting lists that have really built up during the pandemic, that we're as efficient as possible through our elective services, our planned services, our theatres, our outpatients, to make sure we can treat as many people as quickly as we can. Next slide, please. And that's what we're wanting to do, but how we're doing it is hugely important. And again, we worked with staff at the beginning of last year to really understand what matters to them, what resonates with them, and why do they do what they do. And these 3 areas came out. So the first is about including. It's about ensuring that everyone who works here, everyone who gets their care here, feels included. They have a voice. They can call things out that are a problem, but they're listened to as well. Respect is massively important, the way we interact with colleagues and those that use our services. But it's also, again, as highlighted in that last video, we have huge amounts of technical medical skills in this organisation. But as in that example, parents know their children as experts, and we need to respect their view, we need to respect their wishes and how we jointly work through the right care pathways for them. And lastly, really this overwhelming desire to improve. So as I've said before, that desire to make tomorrow just a little bit better than today. And if we've got 6,500 people doing that every day, we know the improvements we can make are transformational. Next slide, please. But again, having nice banners up on the wall describing our values don't really cut it. And we've been working so far with over 100 teams across the organisation. And here are just some of the examples, rather than expecting you to be able to read all of them, just to demonstrate how teams are sitting down with a facilitator, work through and say, what do those values really mean for us in our team? What does good behaviour in those domains look like? And what does poor behaviour? So they can hold each other to account and really kind of jointly sign up to that charter to say, this is the way we want to make our department work. Next slide, please. So just briefly looking ahead to the next year, some of the important features and developments we've got. So it won't escape anybody that industrial action has been a feature of the last year. And we've had a number of staff groups, unions in dispute with the government around pay rates. A number of those disputes have now been resolved and closed down, but we still importantly have the junior doctors and the consultants in dispute with the government. We want to support people's right to take an industrial action because it is their right. And we've facilitated that through colleagues who weren't taking action agreeing to cover, for consultants covering shifts for junior doctors while they were taking action. But we recognise it's hugely disruptive. I'm really pleased that the quality of our emergency services during those periods of industrial action has been very high because of staff, not just the clinical staff, but those people who've worked on the planning to make sure rotas are covered and we can provide safe 24/7 care. But we do know it's had an impact on our planned activity. And so those people waiting, some for quite a long time for surgery, for example, have been cancelled. Each time we've got better at being able to still maintain some elective activity, but it is a sad fact of the scenario that we've had to cancel people. And for that, we apologise, and we are looking to rebook and to try and undertake that activity as soon as possible. Recently, it's been announced we have more industrial action planned in September and October. And so we again go into those times working out how we can provide the best services possible. Next slide, please. I mentioned digital briefly, and this is one of the new developments that's very hot off the press. We have a new digital patient hub. And we've piloted it in one small service, orthotics at the moment, just to test the concept. And we're now rapidly rolling out to many other specialties. So very soon, if you're experiencing care in our organisation and coming in for an outpatient, you will expect to be contacted about this. And as we develop this further, not only will you be able to receive your correspondence through this method, and you'll get information such as maps of the hospital to really help you find where you're going, you'll be able to book appointments and cancel appointments through it. So really trying to make the process as slick as possible. But we're also mindful, again, around health inequalities. There are some people that aren't comfortable using this kind of device. So we will maintain the traditional model of using letters to support people to manage their care going forward. But for many, this is going to be a real step forward. Next slide, please. Ellen signalled earlier on about the next stage of our community working, and this is our integrated heart failure service. And it really brings together the expertise we have within our cardiology team, our consultants and our senior nurses with their colleagues in the community. We have about 4,000 people in Eastern North Herts diagnosed with heart failure, and I believe there are probably about 7,000 in the population, so many not actually picked up yet. And this service is really about trying to work together, but also deliver more and more care in people's homes in the community, rather than needing for them to come into hospital. And we really think this is going to be a step forward for the patients of Eastern North Herts. Another exciting venture that many people will probably have heard and we've been working on for a number of years. We're really pleased that the Department of Health and the local Integrated Care Board have provided funding that we can progress our new vascular hub. This is going to be a state-of-the-art theatre, and you can see the graphic on the screen. This is, as you see, built on stilts, and it's coming out from existing clinical areas, but it's been a bespoke design, really involving the teams to make sure we get the service exactly how they need to deliver service. This will benefit patients not just in our part of the patch, but also over in West Essex and West Hertfordshire, as anyone who requires major vascular surgery will come to this hub, and we will be providing the service on a far bigger footprint. So really exciting times ahead for our vascular service. And again, we've mentioned urgent and emergency care a few times here, and just to give you a bit of a steer on some of the areas we're focusing on. So we're actively in the planning stage to open a new urgent treatment centre here on our Stevenage site, based around the model at the new QE2, which is so well received and sees far more patients than we ever saw when there was an ED at the QE2. And that will hopefully take the right patients away from those coming to ED that don't need a full ED service but need urgent medical attention. We're hoping to have that up at the turn of this calendar year, so we look forward to welcoming patients into that service as we really get into the winter. We've got an extremely nice paediatric ED department, but we believe in addition to that we can also provide children's urgent treatment centre and also a clinical decision unit where we can really play some of those wider services into a dedicated children's space. We're currently reviewing our staffing in our ED and other emergency departments to make sure we've got the right staff on at the right time to provide the care that people need, because we are running a 24-hour service and we can never predict accurately what's coming through. We know so many of our patients now rely on high-tech diagnostics, and we're looking to increase the capacity there. And also there's been a real move in recent years to move to this concept of same-day emergency care. The idea of admitting patients to hospital, particularly those who are frail, and actually being in a bed all day isn't great for their recovery. But the idea of intensive support on the same day and getting people back to their own home is a concept that we've really exploited this year, and we're going to do far more into next year. And finally, we constantly review our inpatient capacity. We have a growing population, we have an ageing population, and we know the demands on our services are increasing. So it's making sure we've got the right capacity in place for those people that need to come into the hospital. And I think my final slide really here is talking about implementing an improvement system. So I'm delighted that we've just entered into a partnership with the Virginia Mason Institute, who are based from Seattle originally and now running a number of hospitals in the States. They've worked with probably 10 hospitals now across the UK over many years, and really taking on board the concepts that were seen in Japan, and Toyota, probably the greatest exponent of the approach. And really it sits behind a model that empowers our frontline staff and trains them in making the improvements they want to see in their services. And I think in that example we saw earlier on around the passport for our children, it's a really good example of where our staff are working with patients, the users of our services, to co-design improvements and better care. And I think it's going to be a really exciting journey for this organisation over the next 3 years and then beyond, how we can really make further improvements at pace. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Adam. So now it's the turn of our online guests to ask questions. Have any questions come through?
Yes, thank you very much, Ellen. So hello and thank you to everyone who has joined us for today's AGM, and thank you to those of you who have already been submitting your questions to the panel. Please remember, those online, that you can submit questions via the Q&A tab, and you can ask your questions anonymously as well if you would like to. Please remember that you can also vote for your favourite question by pressing the thumbs up button on your favourite question, and I'll be using that to select which questions I ask the panel. So the first question, and there are a couple for you to read, I'm afraid. So the first question is, what plans are in place to improve communication between a patient's loved one and the ward staff?
So shall I make a wee start there? So during COVID, there was some excellent work undertaken by one of our consultants in elderly care and one of our senior nurses in dementia care. And they called it Caring Conversations. And it's a really excellent piece of work, looking at how you get really timely and effective communication to the loved ones of patients in a way that is responsible and responsive. And that training is, in fact, we've got a presentation coming up, in fact, this month to executive colleagues to try and mainstream that training across all of our domains. We recognise that sometimes when patients are in hospital, they don't always get the briefings that they should get, either from our medical staff or our nursing staff, to their next of kin, or indeed their carer, or indeed their loved one. So please watch out for Caring Conversations. It's a big piece of work that's situated under fundamentals of care, and it's very important that we get this right and we do better. So I'm really hopeful that this will make a big difference in strengthening those conversations that are vital for our next of kin and our relatives.
Thank you, Teresa.
So the next question again is for you.
Okay.
So what are the benefits to the Trust and our local community of receiving Pathways Excellence designation?
So that's a great question. And you know, I think the Pathways to Excellence passport, if I may, allows us to look at excellence in the clinical setting. So if I give an example of one of our ward areas, the 11s, if you are, not that I would want anybody to be a patient necessarily coming in, but if you were to visit someone on the 11s, what you will see there is the structure that Pathways to Excellence allows our nurses and healthcare support workers to work within. And that's about providing patient-centred care, timely observations, good documentation, making sure that every opportunity the patient's care is well documented, it's safe and it's effective. So that's the major benefit of Pathways to Excellence. It's very nice to have an award that is nationally recognised, but fundamentally what it boils down to is greater patient care and more staff autonomy.
Thank you. And I believe the next question is probably best for Justin and Teresa to answer jointly. So what is being done at the Trust to reassure parents and families who may need to use the neonatal unit following the Lucy Letby case?
Thank you. Yes, that's all right. Thank you. It's a really important question to be asking at the moment. My background is that I'm a paediatrician, and formerly I worked as a neonatologist as well. So I've spent quite a lot of time on the neonatal unit, as have a number of my colleagues over the last few weeks, working with the teams down there. I think that Letby was a very rare person in the NHS. We have 1.3 million people across the country who work for the NHS, all of whom come to work every day to do their best. I think the number of people who think, we don't yet know how she thought and how she got to where she did, is very few and far between. But that still leaves parents of babies on the neonatal unit with questions. They are our most vulnerable patients, and those parents need to feel that they can leave their babies with us and that they can trust us. And I guess the best answer to this is the work that our nurses and doctors on the neonatal unit do every day, day in, day out, 24/7, working with those families and earning the trust of those families, answering their questions, being responsive to them. And I guess that's how they earn the trust. Our job as executives is to support our teams, but also to look at the data. And I spoke a little bit about that in the talk that I gave before. The data that we look at under a really careful microscope to make sure actually we are delivering the safe service that we know our families need.
I would agree with Justin, and I know that over the past couple of weeks and certainly before that, Adam, our Chief Executive, and myself and Justin have been in NICU, our neonatal unit, frequently, and I think some of the concerns that you rightly raise, everyone across the country is asking themselves. Freedom to speak up is vitally important in our organisation. We encourage everyone to speak up if they have a concern. I do believe that we have good processes and we do monitor all of the clinical indicators for our neonatal babies. So we should and would be vigilant to any changes there. However, what we want to do is make sure that we've got that nice balance of clinical support and good freedom to speak up. So I feel that we are in a relatively good place in terms of being able to manage any learnings that will come out from this case in the future.
Thank you. And just on that theme, so someone has asked a question because their baby is currently on the neonatal ward at the moment, and they're asking whether we can reassure them that they are safe.
That's right. Well, first of all, if you have a baby on the neonatal ward at the moment and you would like myself or Justin to come and see you, we would be very happy to do that, and accepting that your confidential information you may not want to share that, but if you want to share it with Sarah and the team, we will certainly do that. How we can assure you that it is safe is that we have followed through with all of the systems checks for our staff that are in our neonatal unit. We've got very good clinical supervision of all the teams that are on duty. We have a very good track record of patient feedback as well, and acting on any concerns. And actually, I did a round, I'm just trying to work out the days, on Tuesday evening, and we got some really genuinely lovely feedback from the parents that were in the department. But anyone who has concerns, please do contact myself, and that can be via comms, and I would be very happy to meet with you, as would my matron and indeed our head of department, and also Dr. Daniels.
Very much. The next question is around the patient hub. So it's just somebody asking when that will be available for all patients at the trust.
So the patient hub, as Adam said, went live last month. Is that orthotics is now live, dermatology goes live next month, and then the plan is we roll out all of the specialties for outpatient appointments up until the 31st of March 2024. So effectively that's a sort of a 5-6 month rollout. So anyone that gets anyone that has an appointment will get a text from us, and then they'll have the ability to enrol into the patient hub.
Thank you, Martin. That was Martin,
Not Mark.
sorry,
It
Mark.
was Martin.
That was Mark, our Chief Information Officer.
Great, lovely. Thank you. The next question is actually around RAC. Just give us some of the recent news. Brilliant is asking, what are your current plans to improve the building structures and whether there is RAC on our hospital sites?
So I'm happy to take that. We actually proactively commissioned a review of the Lister site for RAC a month ago, and that's come back, and this site is RAC free, which in some respects, based on the age of the building, is probably the age of the building where RAC was often used, but we are RAC free. Our other buildings predominantly are rented from other organisations, so the new QE2 Hertford, they are newer builds where RAC wasn't used. However, we have asked for written assurance from the landlords, as it were, to give us that assurance as well. The same with Mount Vernon. Hillingdon Hospitals own that premises, but again, it's a much older building there that wouldn't have used RAC in its construction. So we're very confident we are RAC free. However, we will follow through on all those to make sure that we get written assurance that that is the case.
Great, lovely, thank you very much. And just another reminder as well to those online to please remember to submit your questions via the Q&A tab. You can ask anonymously if you would like to, and also to upvote your favourite question as well, because that is the order in which I'm asking the questions. The next question is around our plans to improve wait times in the emergency department. Can the panel tell us more about these? Is it just for those who arrive by ambulance, or will we be improving wait times for walk-ins as well? So I don't know if Lucy Davies, our Chief Operating Officer, will start that question.
Thanks, Lucy.
Good evening, I'm Lucy Davies, I'm the Chief Operating Officer. Yeah, we've got lots of plans to improve the waiting times in our emergency department, and it's not just for those patients waiting to be handed over from the ambulance to our care, but also for every patient who walks through the door or arrives in whichever means they do arrive. real focus this year is to make sure that we improve our time to diagnosis, treatment or discharge within 4 hours. And all hospitals in the NHS are charged with getting their compliance with the 4-hour standard up to 76% by the end of this year. And we have plans to do that too. We're making a little bit of progress now, and that progress will accelerate with the 6 work streams that Adam just described, particularly, I think, with the arrival of the Urgent Treatment Centre on Leicester's site this winter, and also with the changes that we plan to make to paediatric waiting times through the introduction of a paediatric same-day emergency care service within our children's emergency department, and also a different way of caring for those children who need observations while they're in the department for extended periods of time in what we would call a clinical decision unit for those patients. So those are some of the ways that we will be improving those waiting times, as well as Adam said, the review of staffing that's being undertaken, because that is very particularly to look at our staffing into the evening and night time, where often we see an increase of patients presenting at that time, and our staffing rotas at the moment don't always reflect that as accurately as they could do. So we're going to try to move our staffing rota so that we have more staff when we have more patients, we actually do some very quite sophisticated analysis now, or through looking at our own data about when patients typically arrive on which day of the week, so that we can get that ever more accurate as a match.
Great, thank you. And just sticking with that theme, and also thinking about as well the vascular hub that Adam mentioned in his presentation, have we considered the parking issues with the increasing numbers of service users those 2 new buildings will generate?
So it is an ongoing challenge on this site, parking. We are actively working on a business case to see about increasing the amount of parking. However, it's the difficult balance between additional parking being very expensive to put in place and wanting to prioritise our investment when we have it on clinical services. So we're looking to be quite innovative in the way we may be able to structure something, but the work is ongoing on that, because we do recognise that is a particular challenge around parking on a site which really is landlocked in terms of the ability to just use more space.
And the next question, or the next 2 questions, are around quality improvement projects and the Virginia Mason Institute partnership. So the first question around Virginia Mason, is there any funding assigned to support any improvement work recommended via this? So if anyone suggests if they suggest any improvement works, is there funding alongside that?
Not specifically. Because every improvement needs to be looked on this case. We've made a significant investment over the 3-year period to work with this organisation to understand and scale up our staff to do it. I'm fortunate I've got a fair bit of experience of this organisation and the work they did with 5 other trusts across the UK. And actually, in the vast majority of cases, the improvement comes from people just working on those things without the need for additional investment. However, there will always be occasions when some investment will unlock some real benefit. So as part of what we do now, we are routinely looking at opportunities where people come with cases to say, if we can invest in this, we can unlock this benefit. The examples we've just given, the new urgent treatment centre, the paediatric work, the investment in the staffing, this is all coming at a cost, but it's in order to get the benefit out. So that will continue in that approach.
Great. And the next question around quality improvement is from a member of staff who works at the trust, and they've asked how they can get involved with quality improvement projects in their area. So I don't know whether Teresa will have one.
So, well, that's a great offer, and absolutely. So I think the first protocol would probably be to, if you want to either come see myself or Margaret Mary Devaney, or indeed Tracy Van Wyk, or any of the team in the quality improvement team, they would very happily facilitate you in the right direction so that we could support your project.
There is one other question just come through about Virginia Mason. Just someone asking, why are we using an American company for that one?
So we went out looking for a partner, and we put out a formal procurement, and we had lots of interest. And I think in the end it was 7 companies who were shortlisted to work with us in partnership, and they included 1 or 2 from overseas, and the others were UK based. The actual the group that selected Virginia Mason were unanimous in their choice of them as the preferred partner, in part because what they've demonstrated they've been able to do in the UK. But the other really strong part of their bid is it was a joint offer with Surrey and Sussex NHS Trust, who've been working with them for about 7 or 8 years now. And a lot of the input we're actually getting from leaders at Surrey and Sussex in terms of sharing the knowledge they've got. But frankly, they're internationally recognised for the work they do in this regard, recognised as one of the safest hospitals in the world. And we really wanted to learn from the best, and it was felt to be the right fit for this organisation.
About the benefits available to our carers.
Fantastic. So this is an evolving piece for us, trying to make sure we identify carers and put as much support around them as possible. So the best way to do that is if you can send a little email to our comms team, who'll send it on to me, and I will speak to our head of carers, who will get back to you straight away.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. So no more questions at this stage. Okay, so it remains for me just to say thank you very much for joining us, those of you that joined us online, and thank you to all the team here for putting in the effort to make these presentations and to answer all these questions, and thank you very much. So that will be the end of our AGM. Thank you.